I thought it was the worshipful.
But I did put in a worship.
Thank you. I now call this regular meeting of the Board of Education to order at 7:10 p.m. We'll take a moment of silence to be followed by the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Have the coordinator call the roll.
Mr. Dixon?
Present.
Mr. Rollins?
Here.
Mr. Scrivano?
Here.
Mrs. McCulloch?
Here.
Mr. Siegel?
Here.
Mr. Connor?
Here.
Ms. Stanford?
Here.
With 7 present, we have a quorum.
Thank you. Before we go any further, I'd like to thank Rod and Connor in the back who are working behind the scenes to produce the broadcast on Channel 20. Thank you, gentlemen. So we will now move on to the petitions and communications portion of our meeting when we invite the public to make comments. The First Amendment of the United States Constitution guarantees the rights of citizens to petition their government, as well as provides for freedom of speech. Also, the Illinois School Code requires that there be a time at regular and special meetings for public comment. Thus, we are following those mandates during this petitions and communication portion of our agenda. According to Board Policy 2.230, the board comments portion of the meeting is limited to a total of 30 minutes. The board will not respond to comments at this time. If it's appropriate, you'll be contacted in a timely manner by staff in response to your questions. We ask you to comply with the two-minute rule. And I think that clock is working, isn't it? Maybe, okay. It's not appropriate to address individual board members or individual administrators or discuss matters that would otherwise be confidential in such meetings. Again, thank you for your interest and cooperation in our guidelines. So we have one speaker tonight, and or maybe two. Okay, you want to do it separately? All right. Okay. Mel and Chad, Gilliffin and Anderson.
Good evening.
Thank you for being here.
Thank you.
Okay.
My name is Mel Gilfillan, and I'm the new REA president. I'm a 20-year RPS special education teaching veteran, a parent of 4 RPS 205 graduates, and a West Side resident. So I'm a stakeholder. Just wanted to kind of update you guys on our transition. We started our transition June the 4th, which is basically the day school ended. And then we officially took over July 1st. And I just wanted to come in front of the Board of Education and let you guys know that we've been very impressed with the collaborative efforts of the RPS cabinet, the administration, and we've even had the opportunity to work with a couple of board members on the district leadership team. Basically, I just wanted to introduce myself. I wanted to let the board know that we look forward to working with you, and that I'll have an open door policy, and hope that you guys would reach out to us whenever you felt like you had the need, and really start to get a good working relationship going.
Great.
So thank you.
Thank you. Chad?
And I would reiterate what Mel has said about the transition being smooth. My name is Chad Anderson. I'm the new vice president of the Rockford Education Association. Many familiar faces around the table. I've worked with many of you. And for others, wanted to take this opportunity to put a name with the face. And so, but we do look forward to partnering with all stakeholders, with the board, with administration, in representing our teachers, and of course with our community, all in the best interest of our students. So thank you for the time.
Great, Chad. Thank you. Okay, any board member comments at this time? Siegel.
Today I got to spend some time at the new Constance Lane Elementary School. I was working in the capacity of an ambassador for Erickson. But I am so excited for this school to open. Watching the families go through at registration, get a tour by the student ambassadors, who did a killer job. Was just very exciting to see. They were just so impressed with what a spectacular building it is. The teachers were there, the principal was there. Just really great environment. Really excited for this school to open up in this neighborhood. It's going to be a great, great place.
Mr. Dixon?
I had the privilege of going to Auburn for their registration, and the customer service was excellent. I seen them de-escalate situations that could have turned a different route. And so I really want to give a shout out to Auburn High, which school I went to, I graduated from, so nighttime.
All right. Very good. Any others? I would just like to make a comment about Saturday's breakfast. Part of our job as a school board and as a school district is to listen to our community members. And so Saturday, the school district and the city of Rockford was invited to attend the End Racism breakfast that was at Cliff Breakers and make presentations regarding recruitment of employees with diverse backgrounds. So I just want to say to Matt, I thought you did a great job of presenting our statistics. And when, there was over 100 and some people there, whatever. I mean, you even got a round of applause from when you talked about the RU pathway stuff and all that. So a lot of good feedback from people at the table that I was at working with and answering. We were having idea generation discussions on short-term and long-term strategies for recruitment of diverse employees. So thank you, Matt. Thank you, Aaron. And thank you to the city of Rockford for participating as well, and Reverend Board for kind of pulling it all together. So great discussion. So any other board member comments? Okay. If not, we'll then move on to the consent portion of our agenda, including the following: the meeting minutes of July 9th, payroll, accounts payable, purchase orders, contracts under 10,000, construction bid request logs, July special check run, regular construction bid request log, travel, bid recommendations for the security cameras at Auburn and Guilford High Schools, the contract for bid recommendation for the athletic turf maintenance and weed control, and the following recurring contracts for extended day programming, school works for charter-related services, Midwest District Network, Marco Technologies for the copier lease and service renewal, Allied Benefits, Claims Administrator for retiree supplement insurance plans, Alignment Rockford support, Star Autism support, Independent Hearing Interpreter contract extension, the Center for Sight and Hearing Impaired, the Consolidated Contracts for Personnel Services, the Consolidated Contracts for Therapeutic Day, the Consolidated Contracts for Recurring Contracts, and the following other consent items, including the resolution authorizing directing the preparation of the tentative 2021 fiscal year budget, the new school construction change order logs, the RPS managed work change order, and the Freedom of Information log. Is there a motion and a second to approve the consent items?
So moved.
Moved by Mr. Connor.
Second.
Second by Mr. Siegel. Are there any consent items that board members wish to have pulled for separate consideration? Mr. Connor?
7A.
7A, okay. Mr. Siegel?
6C.
6C. Okay. Okay. I'll ask the coordinator then to call the roll on the approval of the consent items not pulled.
Mr. Dixon?
Yes.
Mr. Rollins?
Yes.
Mr. Scrivano?
Yes.
Mrs. McCullough?
Yes.
Mr. Siegel?
Yes.
Mr. Connor?
Yes.
Ms. Stanford?
Yes.
The motion passes unanimously.
Okay, I'll now take a motion and a second for the approval of 6C, which is accounts payable.
So moved.
Moved by Mr. Connor. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Siegel. Questions or discussion? The coordinator call the roll on the approval of item 6C, accounts payable.
Mr. Rollins?
Yes.
Mr. Scrivano?
Yes.
Mrs. McCullough?
Yes.
Mr. Siegel?
Abstain.
Mr. Connor?
Yes.
Ms. Stanford?
Yes.
Mr. Dixon?
Yes.
The motion passes with 6 yeses, 1 abstain.
I'll now take a motion and a second for the approval of item 7A, which is a bid recommendation for security cameras at Auburn and Guilford High Schools.
So moved.
Moved by Mr. Connor.
Second.
Second by Mr. Rollins. Any questions or discussion? Mr. Connor?
This is just a quick comment, is These items cost a fair amount of money, almost $326,000. But I think what we want to do is remind the public that safety is one of our top priorities. A lot of work went into this, a lot of good thought. So I think that we want to reassure the public that this is a top priority, and this is, from my point of view, a good way that we're really reinforcing that idea.
Okay. Any other comments or questions? Now, how the coordinator call the roll on the approval of 7A, the security cameras at Auburn and Guilford.
Mr. Scrivano?
Yes.
Mrs. McCulloch?
Yes.
Mr. Siegel?
Yes.
Mr. Connor?
Yes.
Ms. Stanford?
Yes.
Mr. Dixon?
Yes.
Mr. Rollins?
Yes.
The motion passes unanimously.
Thank you. We are now on to the closed session consent agenda items, including the following: the appointment of Delaney Bilhars as a 10-month elementary dean, the appointment of Tamara Butler as a 10-month assistant principal at Lincoln Middle School, the appointment of Jason Ware as a 10-month assistant principal at Eisenhower Middle School, the appointment of Joshua Rapun as a curriculum dean of science, the appointment of Raven Slaskowski as dean of secondary mathematics, the appointment of Vicki Hamilton as a 12-month director of teacher effectiveness, the salary adjustment for Daniel Holder, a 12-month director of special education, and the HR organizational report and addendum. Is there a motion and a second to approve these closed session consent items?
So moved.
Moved by Mr. Connor,
Second.
second by Mr. Siegel. Any items that board members wish to have pulled for separate consideration? Mr. Rollins?
10H.
10H, okay. Okay, any others? If not, I'll have the coordinator call the roll on the closed session consent items not pulled.
Mrs. McCulloch?
Yes.
Mr. Siegel?
Yes.
Mr. Connor?
Yes.
Ms. Stanford?
Yes.
Mr. Dixon?
Yes.
Mr. Rollins?
Yes.
Mr. Scrivano?
Yes.
The motion passes unanimously.
I'll take a motion and a second then for the approval of item 10H, which is the HR organizational report.
So moved.
Moved by Mr. Connor,
Second.
second by Mr. Siegel. Questions or discussion? Coordinator then call the roll on the approval of item 10H, the HR organizational report.
Mr. Siegel?
Yes.
Mr. Connor?
Yes.
Ms. Stanford?
Yes.
Mr. Dixon?
Yes.
Mr. Rollins?
Abstain.
Mr. Scrivano?
Yes.
Mrs. McCulloch?
Yes.
The motion passes with 6 yeses, 1 abstain.
Okay. We'll move on to our next agenda item, which is the superintendent's report. Dr. Jarrett.
Thank you very much. Just an exciting time. I had a chance to pop out to registration today, and there are lots of good things going on in the district. We've worked hard to improve that process. One thing I want to let the board know that they will be able to expect is a detailed review of all of our back-to-school processes. There are a number of important meetings that occur to onboard all kinds of different employee groups to our district, and we'll be talking about that. We will also be talking about how the first few days of school goes, how the registration process goes, how our Teacher Institute goes. Lots of big events coming up, and we'll make sure that we do a post-mortem on all those events and look at areas for improvement, but also celebrate the successes. So that will be coming up soon, but this is the exciting time where we get to do all those things and hopefully make sure students, families, and all of our staff feel extremely welcome and excited to start the school year, which is our core objective this time of year. So thank you very much.
We'll move on then to our action items for tonight. First one is 12A, the incubator EDU grant acceptance. Is there a motion and a second to approve this?
So moved.
Moved by Mr. Connor,
Second.
second by Mr. Siegel. Any questions or discussion? Seeing none, I'll have the coordinator call the roll on the approval of item 12A, the incubator EDU grant acceptance.
Mr. Connor?
Yes.
Ms. Stanford?
Yes.
Mr. Dixon?
Yes.
Mr. Rollins?
Yes.
Mr. Scrivano?
Yes.
Mrs. McCulloch?
Yes.
Mr. Siegel?
Yes.
The motion passes unanimously.
Our next agenda item is 12B, which is the consolidated contracts, Part 1, that Dr. Vosberg presented. Is there a motion and a second to approve this item?
So moved.
Moved by Mr. Connor,
Second.
second by Mr. Siegel. Any questions or discussion? Seeing none, I'll have the coordinator call the roll on the approval of the consolidated contracts, Part 1.
Ms. Stanford?
Yes.
Mr. Dixon?
Yes.
Mr. Rollins?
Yes.
Mr. Scrivano?
Yes.
Mrs. McCulloch?
Yes.
Mr. Siegel,
Yes.
Mr. Connor.
Yes.
The motion passes unanimously.
Okay, our next item is 12C, which is Consolidated Contracts Part 2 that Dr. Vosberg presented. Motion and a second to approve this.
So moved.
Moved by Mr. Connor.
Second.
Second by Mr. Siegel. Any questions or discussion? Seeing none, I'll have the coordinator then call the roll on the approval of 12C, the Consolidated Contracts Part 2.
Mr. Dixon,
Yes.
Mr. Rollins,
Yes.
Mr. Scrivano.
Yes.
Mrs. McCulloch.
Yes.
Mr. Siegel.
Yes.
Mr. Connor.
Yes.
Ms. Stanford.
Yes.
The motion passes unanimously.
Our next item is 12D, which is the Board Docs Contract Agreement Dr. Jared presented. Is there a motion and a second to approve this item?
So moved.
Moved by Mr. Connor,
Second.
second by Mr. Siegel. Any discussions or question? Seeing none, I'll have the coordinator call the roll.
Mr. Rollins,
Yes.
Mr. Scrivano.
Yes.
Mrs. McCulloch,
Yes.
Mr. Siegel.
Yes.
Mr. Connor.
Yes.
Ms. Stanford.
Yes.
Mr. Dixon.
Yes.
The motion passes unanimously.
Our next item is 12E, which is the AT&T FirstNet mobile software licensing. Is there a motion and a second to approve this item?
So moved.
Moved by Mr. Connor.
Second.
Second by Mr. Rollins. It's a race. Okay. Any question or discussion? All right, have the coordinator then call the roll.
sorry.
Oh, Mr. Connor.
Yeah, one thing I wanted to say is that there was a lot of good preparation into this. Sometimes, like tonight, we move fairly quickly, and for those of you that don't see the committee of the whole, there was a lot of good effort and a lot of good thought that went into this. So every once in a while, I want to make sure that when it's going fast, things like this, which there was a lot of really good evidence behind it, a lot of good questions were answered. So really, this is an example from my point of view of something that in some ways is not easy, and well done in terms of the preparation.
Thank you. I'll have the coordinator then call the roll on the item 12E, which is AT&T FirstNet mobile software licensing.
Mr. Scrivano,
Yes.
Mrs. McCulloch,
Yes.
Mr. Siegel,
Yes.
Mr. Connor,
Yes.
Ms. Stanford,
Yes.
Mr. Dixon,
Yes.
Mr. Rollins.
Yes.
The motion passes unanimously.
Our next item is 12F, which is the physical security software license. Is there a motion and a second to approve this action item?
So moved.
Moved by Mr. Connor,
Second.
second by Mr. Siegel. Any questions or discussion? Mr. Connor.
Again, on this one, I want to emphasize to the public, a lot of thought goes into security, and so again, kudos to staff who are really, I think, coming up with a lot of good thinking in terms of what's the best for security. So if that's a theme tonight that you walk away with as the public, that's great, because safety is a huge concern for us.
Thank you. Any others? Now I'll have the coordinator now call the roll on the approval of item 12F.
Mrs. McCulloch? Yes. Mr. Siegel?
Yes.
Mr. Connor?
Yes.
Ms. Stanford?
Yes.
Mr. Dixon?
Yes.
Mr. Rollins?
Yes.
Mr. Scrivano?
Yes.
The motion passes unanimously.
Our next item is 12G, which is the Illinois Principal Association New Principal AP Mentoring. Dr. Vosberg presented this. Is there a motion and a second to
So
approve
moved.
this item? Moved by Mr. Connor,
Second.
second by Mr. Siegel. Any questions or discussion? Have the coordinator call the roll.
Mr. Siegel?
Yes.
Mr. Connor?
Yes.
Ms. Stanford?
Yes.
Mr. Dixon?
Yes.
Mr. Rollins?
Yes.
Mr. Scrivano?
Yes.
Mrs. McCulloch?
Yes.
The motion passes unanimously.
Okay, our next item is the PTO donation to Marshall Elementary School. That was presented at the Committee of the Whole by Dr. Vosberg. Is there a motion, a second to approve this?
So moved.
Moved by Mr. Connor,
Second.
second by Mr. Siegel. Questions or discussion, comments? Have the coordinator call the roll.
Mr. Connor?
Yes.
Ms. Stanford?
Yes.
Mr. Dixon?
Yes.
Mr. Rollins?
Yes.
Mr. Scrivano?
Yes.
Mrs. McCulloch? Mr. Siegel?
Yes.
The motion passes unanimously.
Thank you. We are now on to new business, and administration is requesting the board suspend the rules to consider item 13A, which is urgent email archiver replacement Intradin as the antiquated email archiver failed on July 24th as a result of being targeted with some ransomware. The email archiver is an integral system for responding to FOIA requests. So I need a motion and a second to suspend the rules.
So
I think
moved.
that goes first, John.
Second.
Moved and seconded. We don't discuss that. No. Okay, any questions or comments on that? Not how the coordinator then call the roll on the suspension of the rules.
Ms. Stanford?
Yes.
Mr. Dixon?
Yes.
Mr. Rollins?
Yes.
Mr. Scrivano?
Yes.
Mrs. McCulloch?
Yes.
Mr. Siegel?
Yes.
Mr. Connor?
Yes.
The motion passes unanimously.
So we'll go ahead with the presentation. Well, let's do that first. Okay, is there a motion and a second to approve item 13A, the email archiver replacement incident?
So moved.
Second.
Connor, second by Mr. Dixon. Any questions? We've got to have the presentation before we vote, don't we? You can. Okay. Do we want to have a presentation? Okay. Jason, are you doing the presentation?
I don't have a presentation put together, but just want
Okay.
to make a few comments on the reason for this. So back late last year, we were actually looking at replacing this archiver. We've had it in place for about 17 years. We had full intentions on doing it this year. Unfortunately, we had a ransomware attack that did cause a failure of the current archiver. It's been a very slow and very painstaking system for legal to do their FOIA requests out of. But we had a failure on July 24th with that system. So we had the need to move to a different system. We evaluated several different systems in March of this year and came to the Intradyne product, which is it's a cloud-hosted service for email archiving. And it allows to do some additional features which we don't currently have. One of those being some automated redaction features, which we don't have, which is really nice, as opposed to printing out emails and redacting certain things out of the emails when we're responding to FOIA. We can put different templates and customizations in there, whether we're redacting social security numbers or anything that looks like a student ID or anything of that effect. That can be done without having to go through a manual process. So this is, we propose just to move forward with this particular archiver here for the foreseeable future.
Any board questions or comments for Mr. Barthel? Mr. Rollins?
So I guess, I used to ask these questions all the time, but everybody's doing it now. So we're putting all of our email into the cloud, all of our archived emails. Are we confident we can get them back if something happens, if we terminate this license, if they terminate the license, if something happens? Can we get all these emails back out of the cloud?
Yes, we can. So they are set up the way it's configured. We've got redundancy and backups in the agreement with this company, and there's also a transition process. If we decide to terminate later, they will allow us to transition all that email from their system back into whatever archiver solution we decide might be appropriate in the future if we decide to move away from Intradyne.
All right, thanks.
Mr. Connor?
A couple points. Number one, full disclosure, Mr. Bartel and I did talk about this. And tonight's theme is, come on, somebody's got to know tonight's theme is security. Yes, thank you.
Okay, there you go.
Yes, Michelle was paying attention. She really, okay, I owe her a coffee. One of the things that Mr. Bartel did not say is that he used the word ransomware. This is getting to be a huge problem. For obvious reasons, if you pay attention to the news, there's been a lot about foreign governments and hacking and all the rest. And so one of the things I'll say is that this is becoming a danger, and I know at the corporate level there's a lot of attention on this. So this is something we really need to do, and I don't think there's any disagreement amongst the board, at least that I know of. But for the public standpoint, the thing to know is that the effect was really, I think, reduced because a lot of things had been put in place, but there are always things that you can do to improve it, and that's what this represents, is an improvement. But everyone should expect that we're going to have more of these. that there is no one and done when it comes to security, and particularly when it comes to things like hacking, anything like that, that kind of activity. So again, top concern from my point of view, we're addressing it. We did this quickly, and tonight the board has moved that this go right away, which is a good thing because we want to respond. Again, kudos to the administration for really responding quickly.
Okay, any other questions or comments for Jason? Thank you.
Thank you.
The coordinator then call the roll on the approval of item 13A, the email archiver replacement.
Mr. Dixon?
Yes.
Mr. Rollins?
Yes.
Mr. Scrivano?
Yes.
Mrs. McCulloch?
Yes.
Mr. Siegel?
Yes.
Mr. Connor?
Yes.
Ms. Stanford?
Yes.
The motion passes unanimously.
Okay, and as usual, we always save the best for last. Miss French, okay, it does seem that way, is going to talk to us about our final two items, which are vans for instructional purposes and the resource adoption for college and career readiness.
Okay. Good evening. My name is Bridget French. I'm the Executive Director of College and Career Readiness. My first presentation this evening is about vans for instructional purposes. We want all of our students to have access to work-based learning, and in order to do so, we need more modes of transportation to get them to these experiences. We have 4 key experiences that we want all of our students to have throughout their high school career. They are Academy Expo, Sophomore Site Visit, Junior Job Shadow, and Senior Internships or Capstones. We have this on our high school scorecard and want at least 95% of all students to experience these 4 items. Our current state, there are 2 different items that we are proposing today. One is a truck for Guilford High School's construction program. Currently, they had a truck on loan from the facilities department that actually broke down. And so the teacher of the course was using his own vehicle to transport the trailer. The trailer cannot be left on site because there is nowhere to secure the trailer, and it has a significant amount of tools that are very expensive, so we don't want to leave the trailer on site. We also use school buses to transport our students for work-based learning. Last year we piloted job shadows with the support of Alignment Rockford. We piloted with a small group of juniors, 150 students. There were times, many times, that students were 1 or 2 per bus because of the intensity of the experience. We do keep the numbers under 4 students per business. That really gives the student an opportunity to go really deep into the business and understand what they do and actually have an opportunity to do it. However, that also meant that at times we had 1, 2, 3, or 4 students on an entire school bus going to these locations. Our alternative choices would be to do nothing and continue our current practice. That may mean that not all of our students would be able to have work-based learning opportunities because we may not have the capacity in our current transportation department to transport all of those students. For Guilford, if they are unable to purchase the truck, that would mean the employee would need to continue to use his own vehicle. Our solution is to purchase 5 vans, 1 for each high school, and a truck that would allow Guilford to continue to pull that trailer to the construction site every day. That truck is actually paid for through CNC, the Career Education Associates of North Central Illinois. They are our Perkins dollars pass-through organization. So those funds actually go directly from CNC to the vendor of the truck. There are no finances that pass through the district, but there are ancillary costs to the district for gasoline, insurance, and maintenance that will come directly out of Guilford's school budget. The cost of the vans is $23,370 per van for a total of $116,000, with total ancillary costs of $9,750. Again, that's for gas, maintenance, and insurance for all 5 vans. We will assess the situation by, again, looking to ensure that all of our students have those work-based learning opportunities, and we would like 95% of all students to have those 4 experiences before they graduate from high school. We calculated the number of students we want to get out to these experiences, and we gathered that it's somewhere between 6,000 and 7,000 students per year. So if we're looking at the cost of what we currently spend on transportation to get our students to these locations, plus the vans, divided by the number of students, we came up with $23.73 per student, approximately is what we're looking at to get students all 4 of these very rich experiences with our community partners. We will report back on our monthly meeting with high school principals, and we will give an annual report to Cabinet and the Board of Education. I've also included in board docs, along with the PDSA, sort of an operational plan that we worked on with the support of the Transportation Department, the Legal Department, the Finance Department, the HR Department, and the REA. So at this time, I am happy to answer any questions you might have.
Mr. Dixon, you want to go first?
Yes. When I first went over, I was in agreement with the buying of the vans because I thought it gives the students more opportunities to be exposed to different fields.
Yeah.
And so I'm still in agreement with it. But before that, what were we doing before to give these kids experience? We were taking the bus?
Yes.
Is that my understanding?
So currently, our students, all of our students go to the Academy Expo when they're freshmen. All
Right.
students go to a site visit when they're a sophomore, and we're using our current buses to take students. Right now, we're only getting, well, in FY19, we only had about 150 students participate in a job shadow. It was a small pilot group. In order to scale that up for all of our juniors, and in order to start the planning for internships, we have to have more capacity for transportation. So yes, we've currently been using our buses. The Transportation Department has been wonderful to work with. We've had no problems. We just need more capacity.
Okay.
Mr. Siegel?
Did you look at an option to lease vehicles? And it seems like we lease a lot of other things. Does that sort of strategy apply also for
So
transportation?
I worked directly with the Transportation Department, and they felt that this cost was the best return on investment for the district.
Okay, I just didn't see it as one of the alternatives that were looked at, and it seems like that would have been a fairly logical thing because we do pursue other acquisitions through lease.
Mr. Connor?
Yeah, so 2 things. One is, I'm really in favor of this, and I think Ms. French and I have had this discussion, is that having people have a cost-effective way of getting around is really, I think, key to this. And I'd almost ask if we don't have plans, and not tonight, obviously, to expand out to other areas. Because the second point, from my point of view, is, well, first of all, let me say on the first part, there was good cooperation across the board. So it's good to see. I'm glad the teachers union is here tonight, because I think if this is an example of all of us working together, that's a good start, because we want to do these things in concert and really need to think about it. So that logistical part. But what I would say is, one of the things we've talked about is this as kind of a leverage to a broader plan of academics, where there are a number of classes, that I could think of, like, say, whether it's music, whether it's some of the pathways where you've got skills, perhaps automotive and so forth, that this might be the start of expanding what our students can, what they can experience. And you brought up the internships, that should really expand, which I think we want to. One of the things that I've heard is that our district has really done a good job at things like healthcare, and that's starting to be a real draw for students in our schools, because we have practical delivery on that. And it would seem to me that this kind of program really builds on that, so that, and if I might say so, not just for the big organizations, I have a lot of folks I talk to that have small businesses. And one of the things with vans and things that are flexible is I would think that you could have the flexibility of going to more locations, having the opportunity to do internships for those kids that are interested in entrepreneurship. So I think this is a really great start and would really encourage us to come back and not only say that this was successful, but all the other areas and what we might do over a longer period of time.
Thank you.
Mr. Rollins?
Yes, there's an actual quote attached here, but I guess my question is, are we required to bid this out? Are we bidding this out?
So my understanding is we're going through a consortium, the state purchasing consortium. That's my understanding with the,
That is correct. That's what the, Mr. Slife, that's how he explained it to me, yes.
I do just want to address one, the eagerness to broaden the use of the vans or similar type vehicles. Everybody has to, if we're hauling students for academic reasons, they have to essentially become bus drivers. So they have to go through the same training and are subject to the same DOT rules. So it's just something to keep in mind.
I had a question, Bridget. At some point, you're going to have to replace these vans. Do you have an expected life of each of the vehicles? Is it 6 years, 8 years, 10 years, or we don't know?
I believe it's 5 to 6 years. I would want to get a definite answer from Mr. Slife, and
All
I
right.
can bring that to our next
Because at
board
some
meeting.
point in time, you're going to need to come back and say, we got to spend the money to replace these because they're
Sure.
worn out or whatever, so. Okay. Any other questions or comments for Bridget? Mr. Conner?
So let me just answer and say, it's a very fair point about the requirements for that, but I think that would be part of the planning. So, for example, one of the things that I think is true is that we have not had maybe as many opportunities for the bus drivers during the day, and even though, that is a limitation, I think having more options for staff is a good thing. I would think, again, that if we had a plan around this, that logistical things like Mrs. Hoadley rightfully brought up would be a part of the planning. But I think the opportunity, and if I might say so, one of the things we've talked a lot about is the opportunity, say, with banding together of small businesses. If we have options like this, we can go to small businesses and really actively engage them on practical solutions. I think if this district gets known as somebody that provides practical solutions, which I think this is, then I think we're building on what I think is a strength.
And we have identified some key staff that would be chaperoning these trips anyway, who are willing to go through the training and drive the vans.
Okay. Resource adoption?
All right. Thanks, Brooke. Okay. This is for resource adoption for a course that was formerly called Freshman Seminar, will now be called College and Career Readiness. That is the newly released curriculum is launching for all freshmen starting September 3rd. And the curriculum leadership team identified a need for new textbook for the class. The curriculum leadership team is teacher-led, and they were not satisfied with the current text from the freshman seminar course. Additionally, it is out of print. So what we have in the schools is all we have left. And they did do a thorough examination of the current text compared to the curriculum that they developed, and felt that it was it really did not measure up. So alternative choice one would be to use online resources, and we felt that that wouldn't provide enough consistency for our students across the district, nor did we find enough rich materials that could be used. The second alternative choice would be to look for another resource, but the curriculum leadership team felt that the other resources were not as good as the one that Pearson offers. The third is to continue using our current resource, but again, it's not in print any longer, so we only have available what is currently in our schools. It also doesn't include what we call employability skills or soft skills, and this new text does. The text is called College and Career Readiness, and it is by the publisher Pearson. And it aligns to the Post-Secondary Workforce Readiness Act, which developed these employability skills, which are often what we refer to as soft skills, which are deeply embedded into the core curriculum of the course. The total cost of the textbooks is $42,913.21. That includes 420 textbooks. That's 100 per traditional school, 20 for Roosevelt. Additionally, there's digital access and some professional development opportunities for our teachers. We will assess the situation through formative and summative assessments, type 2 assessment data, and an annual curriculum audit. The return on investment will be full implementation of the text and the course across all 5 schools. And then, of course, we hope that this course provides a rich opportunity for students to make an informed decision for their academy, which, of course, we hope helps all students become college, career, and life ready. Reed Jutras, the Director of Career and Technical Education, led the curriculum leadership team. He will report back to Instructional Council in the fall and spring of the next school year and has been working very closely on onboarding the teachers with the curriculum. Any questions?
Mr. Connor.
It must be my night. Well, I've said this one before, and I will express a little disappointment that alternative 1 wasn't viable. I'm a little surprised that the same material for textbooks was not available online. And I'm sure you all evaluated, so I'm not questioning that. But I would almost question Pearson to say, hey, what the hey? I mean, seriously. I mean, I think one of the things, full disclosure, I've said a number of times now is, I would think in terms of budget, we would see the amount going to textbooks in that sense that our physical print go down and that online goes up. There's a lot of reasons for that, and especially for the younger group, they're already highly electronically savvy. And so what I would say is the other part is that it's much easier to lose a book. I mean, in that sense. So the only thing I'll say is, and this is a small example, and I know the cost on this one is not enormous, but I think one of the things I would like to do is challenge the publishers and say, you know, why aren't more of these online? You know, our board, you know, I'm just speaking for myself, but is asking for alternatives, and it would seem cost effective at a certain point because you're not replacing as much, and whatever platform we use that could be reused for other delivery of curriculum and materials.
So I apologize for not mentioning this in our presentation. This is actually purchasing a classroom set, and there are significant online resources that come with the text, and that's one of the reasons why they chose it. So the students will actually only have access to the book while they're in the classroom, and they'll have access to the online resources when they're at home. So I'm sorry I failed to mention that.
All right. Well, as the great Emily Littella once said,
Sure.
never mind.
Okay.
But the point is still there.
Yeah, understand. Yeah. Any other questions or comments for Bridget? Okay.
Thank you.
All right, thank you, Bridget. Both of these will come to our board for a vote at our August 27th board meeting. Any other business or agenda items for tonight? Mr. Rollins.
I'm going to cheat. This is actually a board member comment that I should have made. I just want to thank the mayor of Rockford and the superintendent for guest bartending about a week and a half ago.
Yes.
And an event to raise money to offset the deductible for the burn playgrounds and some of the costs of the cameras. I haven't heard any numbers, but I think it was probably a pretty successful event.
$13,500.
Yeah, I was going to say.
$13,500, so that'll help. There were also a significant number of our administrators who were there working in the room, so I would like to thank them as well. Although, as I told her, I told Mrs. Detman, if it's not actually illegal to use a cute baby to sell raffle tickets,
Yeah, okay.
it ought to be.
There you go. Any other further comments or agenda items? If not, I'll take a motion to adjourn. Moved by Mr. Connors, or second? Second by Mr. Siegel. All those in favor say aye. Opposed, same sign. We are adjourned at 7:55.
All right.